So very excited to be chatting to Marjorie Vizethann today, who has over 15 years worth of paid search experience, has generated over $1 billion in revenue for top brands such as Ancestry.com, Staples, and UNICEF. She now runs an agency, Alpine Analytix, which focuses on helping businesses in the health and wellness sector move Google Ads into their most profitable growth channel. And on top of that, also runs the Paid Search Hub, which is a learning community to help people learn about Google Ads, industry news, tips and tricks. I signed up a couple of weeks ago. I've not had a chance to go deep on that platform yet, but it looks really cool. Hopefully I've done that platform justice. Anything you'd add to what that platform offers?
Yeah, so it's a school community, if you're familiar with Alex Hormozi, and it's just an online community. And so it's my vision for it was just for paid search professionals or even digital marketing professionals. Like, we had a new member that has an SEO background. He's been in digital marketing for a very long time, but he's really trying to learn more about Google Ads and paid search. So that's the reason he joined. But yeah, just I guess like safe and welcoming space for like-minded people to come together and network, get to know each other. They may want to bounce campaign ideas or challenges off one another. Sometimes they're shifting from agency life into freelancing, and they need some recommendations about reputable freelance platforms or how to price their services, among other things. So that's really my vision for it. We have Tuesday talks where you can have access to me and other community members. It's kind of an open forum discussion for people just to have a coffee and chat.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've not had a chance to join one of those yet, but looking forward to doing that in the future. It's interesting, actually, you mentioned about like people from other sort of peripheral industries coming into Google Ads. There's organized a paid search meetup in New York, and a couple of people who signed up are actually in like analytics or sort of close fields and looking to get into paid search, which is super interesting. So yeah, I guess it's great that your platform exists to help those people sort of find their way into the industry. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. And also excited to have you as a member. And I think what's cool about LinkedIn and then communities like mine and others, that they're global now. And so, I'm based in the US, you're based in the US, and several of our members are US based, but we're now starting to have members join from all over the world. And I have a LinkedIn network now with people from, honestly, there's some countries I've had to look up, which is really cool. And, it wasn't really the case even like 7-10 years ago. Like, you really didn't have that phenomenon. So I think that's been really interesting, and I really value that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. We could definitely spend a long time talking about LinkedIn and like building a community on there and networking. But yeah, I think we sort of spoke prior to this about a couple of the subjects we'd like to sort of geek out on from a paid search perspective. And I think one of the things that came up was just this idea of a full funnel strategy on Google Ads, given the sort of different campaign types and access to different inventory in the Google Ads ecosystem. So I guess we just dive in. Like, what does a full funnel strategy look like in Google Ads for you?
So before I directly answer that question, when I'm speaking to like a C-suite audience or a business executive that may not have an intimate understanding of Google Ads, I try to start with an analogy that's relatable to them. So I view full funnel strategy like I would view a diversified investment portfolio. So, for example, to reach your financial goals, you may have real estate investments, stocks, bonds, etc. And I think that sort of sets the stage in a way that's relatable for a business audience, where each campaign type that ladders back to a stage in the funnel or part of the user's journey, from the initial interaction all the way to the ultimate conversion. Each campaign type plays a role in that. And so I'd like to sort of set the stage that way, and then dive into, some of the specifics, how I think about the funnel, what the objective is at each stage of the funnel, and then, taking it a level down into which campaign types I typically use for each, and then, going from there.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I guess that's super powerful to take something that maybe not everybody understands, but then turn it into an analogy that everybody kind of understands in terms of like
Mhm.
investment portfolio. So that's really cool. You talked there about different campaign types and where they fit in the objectives. How do you view that? Like where does like core search sit versus a PMax or a demand gen, or is it more within core search that the kind of funnel could be stretched out? Like how do you think about that?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is, the very top of the funnel, you are ultimately trying to increase awareness around your brand or your product or your service offering. And so, in my opinion, the most upper funnel campaign types are going to be standalone YouTube campaigns. You could also argue standalone display campaigns, although just based on my own experience, not a huge fan of standalone display. But I do think that standalone YouTube campaigns, when they're executed properly with the right creative, can be really powerful. Then moving down to mid funnel. So, there you're in the consideration stage of the user's journey. That campaign type for me is typically demand gen.
Mm.
I think of demand gen as Google's answer to Meta. So you have single image, carousel image, as well as video, and you have lookalike audiences, which is something that you don't have available in other campaign types on Google Ads that you would have like on a Facebook or something else, right? And so um, at that stage of the funnel, you're trying to engage users. So they have knowledge likely of your brand already, but they need more information to take action, which ultimately would be moving lower funnel to the final conversion, whether that's a lead form submission for lead gen. I have primarily a lead gen background, or if it's ecom, the purchase or sale.
Yeah.
And then at the lower funnel, the campaign types for me would be search, dynamic search ads or DSAs, PMax. When PMax first was introduced, I think that a lot of search marketers, including myself, did consider it more of an upper to mid funnel campaign type. But as it's evolved, and I think as marketers that have tested it have evolved, we've now understand about PMax that it will go after the easiest, if you will, bottom funnel conversions, which is why many people are excluding brand and trying to use it to go after some broader types of conversions across Google's ecosystem, and not just the easy to pick up sort of branded search conversions, because at that point, it's not really being used for what you want it to be used for. And then finally remarketing, right, which is obviously going to be low funnel.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that will make sense. Yeah, I think a lot of people probably spend a disproportionate amount of their time figuring out where PMax sits and what it's picking up and what it shouldn't be picking up.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I also was kind of under the belief that PMax was a kind of had the ability to do mid and upper funnel when it first came about. I think maybe it still kind of can. It just depends on how you set it up.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, to your point, because everyone's kind of then gravitated towards seeing it as a bottom of funnel, maybe Google have seen that, well, actually that space of up and middle funnel is kind of, they didn't have a product for that, and that's kind of where demand gen has then been pushed to sort of fill that gap. How do you, maybe this is a stupid question, but how do you set up demand gen from like a bid strategy perspective? Do you still focus it on conversions or something else?
I focus it on conversions, but I think it's important, and I think this is something we can also dive into a little bit more specifically. It's like a subtopic of this, right? Um, is understanding, and I think this is brands are challenged by this when they are first adopting a full funnel approach or strategy, is really understanding which KPIs are appropriate for each stage of the funnel. So with demand gen, yes, I will have it be a conversion based campaign, but the type of conversion, depending on the brand I'm working with, may be different than a lead form submission or a purchase. And what I mean by that is, I worked with a large brand, and GA360, so the paid version of Google Analytics, or GA4, was their source of data truth, not only for Google Ads and paid search, but across all their paid media channels.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them, we were able to come up with KPIs, working with their data science team and working with our agency's analytics team, to collectively come up with KPIs that were more appropriate for mid-funnel and particularly upper funnel campaigns. So for example, for upper funnel campaigns, in GA4, we were able to create a custom conversion event that was called an engaged visit. And an engaged visit was a variety of on-site actions. So for example, on one particular landing page, you may have a scroll depth of 40% or greater. That would be considered an engaged visit. Or if there is a video on the landing page, a completed video view, right? And there could be a variety of other on-site or on-page actions that roll up under that conversion event named engaged visit. And then from there, you can start benchmarking cost per engaged visit. And so if you can get your client and the analytics teams on board with thinking about using a KPI other than just a bottom funnel lead or sale revenue based sort of KPI, right? I think that that's half the battle in successfully adopting a full funnel strategy. So for demand gen, it's a little bit more mid funnel, compared to the example I was just speaking about. You could probably still use, a lead form submission or a sale conversion metric, as long as your client understands that because of the type of campaign it is and where it kind of plays a part in the user's journey and in the funnel, if you look at it as a line item by itself, it may not meet the ROAS goal that you've assigned to like your search campaigns or your lower funnel campaigns. And so I think there's a lot of consideration and sort of careful planning and alignment that needs to happen before you just launch these campaigns.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I wanted to go, because it feels like that's almost the hardest part of setting that up, is convincing the client that you can't look at this one line item in the same way you're looking at the bottom of funnel activity, because it's going to look terrible, at least in the short term. And the way you win, or the way you scale, is by sort of coming away from that bottom of funnel addiction a little bit, and then moving into the funnel. But that requires a different framework or a different way of looking at success on the short term. How do you find that conversation? I'm guessing that's not always an easy conversation to have.
It really depends on the client, and I think it also depends on the brand's circumstances. So if it were a smaller to medium-sized brand, maybe they haven't even found product market fit, or they have product market fit and they are scaling as a company, and they've had some early success with Google Ads, with more bottom funnel campaign types like search, which I absolutely would recommend starting at the bottom of funnel and get proof of concept there. And then they want to sort of move upward in the funnel. I think, for a client like that, you really have to have a lot of educational conversations and lay out for them using, insights and data, whether if they don't have their own data, you can use industry benchmarks or examples from similar clients that you may have, to sort of present to them a framework that you can have a conversation with them around. This is how we think you should measure it. These are the KPIs that would make sense for your brand, and see if that's something that they're open to. I think that your client has to be willing to, and it has to have the funds, quite frankly, to not only have the budget adequate enough to fully fund a full funnel approach and have it be successful, but also to set aside, whether you want to call it a testing budget, right? Like set aside a budget that's not going to be held to the same standards to be called a success or failure as you would like your bottom funnel search campaigns. For example, maybe they're smashing revenue goals. They have a ROAS of 3.0. Your client's thrilled, right? Like they're you're going to have to make sure you really set the right expectations when you are moving into those mid to upper funnel campaigns, so that there are no surprises and your client's unhappy and feels like it's wasted spend. And so, with those types of SMB advertisers that may be new to this, it would be a much different conversation than larger brands I've worked with, where they probably already have a full funnel strategy, or at least are very open to it. And then, those conversations are a little bit different and a little bit easier. And they tend to lean more so into like, okay, how are we going to produce all this creative that we need for the images and the video assets? How quickly can we produce them with your creative team? What do those turnaround times look like? What do we need to create and, whether it's G4 or whatever your source of data truth is, getting analytics teams together, right? It's a very different type of conversation based on the client.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you touched on it there, the creative. I feel like as you move up the funnel, that element of the campaign becomes just so much more important. How do you approach quality of creative? Do you find it relatively easy to be able to go to a client and say, this creative isn't really where it needs to be to make sense to do this kind of activity, or is it more of a test and learn approach?
It's a great question. Again, I think it's specific to the client, and also, whether it's, if you're a freelancer and you're handling it, that may look very different than if you're working full-time for an agency that has their own creative department, or your client has a creative department, or both of them do, right? And so, if you're in a situation where there is an existing creative department, either internally or externally, that conversation is going to be more so about, okay, these are the different ad specs that we're going to need for these campaign types. This is the frequency, at which we recommend, like, that we are putting in refreshed creatives. This is like our testing methodology, right? So like that would be the conversation you're having, versus either you don't have those creative capabilities. Although I do think with all the rapid developments in AI, like that's becoming a lot more accessible than it was even 2 years ago. That was, and even for it, surprisingly enough, even for really large brands I've worked with that do have a creative team, they're not just creating assets for paid search, right? Like just for the piece of the business you touch, they're doing all kinds of amazing creative endeavors, and sometimes their schedule is packed, months out. And so that actually used to be, like I said, even a couple of years ago, potentially for small and big brands, like a roadblock for these demand gen and PMax and YouTube campaign types. But I do think, even in the last year, I've really seen like that's much more accessible now. Like Google Ads even has, some of their own AI creative asset capabilities in platform now. And some of the other tools that are out there, that I think over time that's just going to become less of a barrier to entry.
Yeah, we're definitely getting more and more questions over the use of AI creative. I mean, certainly not everybody's sold, but it's definitely a question of when, not if.
Mm-hmm.
I guess on the subject of AI, pivoting slightly into more the Google AI algorithm bidding, are there any sort of issues you come across there, just in terms of the sort of the whole black box element of Google in inventory? Are you having any questions or pushback there, or is that less of an issue?
Sometimes, I think, paid search folks are smart, and so there are people like Mike Rhodes, for example, that has amazing PMax scripts,
Yeah.
and so for some of them are free or relatively minimal cost, and it's, if you present this black box technology right, over time, there are going to be creative people that find workarounds, for lack of a better term, to give you some more insight compared to like the limited visibility that the platform may provide itself. So I think things like that certainly help. I do think some clients, though, especially with the Google court proceedings, that have come to light, have, in all of that, it has really diminished trust in Google. I think more so now than in previous years. And so, some clients I think it also comes down to how proven the channel is for a client. Like I've worked with some clients where Google Ads actually is their largest and most profitable customer acquisition channel. So they already know it works. They're confident that it works. They may be a little bit more hesitant around trying a newer campaign type, whether that's a PMax or something else, if that's new for their account, and they may just need to be educated, and they'll ask for my point of view and things like that. But they're also typically just already sold on the fact that it works for their company and their bottom line, and they're a little bit more willing to hand over, let's say, a $10,000-$20,000 test budget, with some parameters to go out and see if they can move higher in the funnel and have some of these newer campaign types be successful for them. I think if it's a brand that's really risk adverse, and typically smaller brands or growth stage companies that are sort of counting every penny, and may just not have a testing budget, right? They may not be able to throw 20, 50, 100 grand at something just to see if it works. That's a lot of times those are the instances where, clients are just a lot more wary and kind of want to stick to what they feel is more proven and is less of that black box technology. So I think the short answer is it depends.
Yeah. The answer in most paid search questions, it depends, which is what keeps it fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. I feel like the opportunity within this in terms of Google Ads as a full or multi-funnel strategy is pretty big, because I saw a poll on LinkedIn around the use of demand gen, and I think only 20% of people were using demand gen on that particular poll, which suggests there's like a big opportunity, because you could maybe believe that if loads of people haven't leaned into that campaign type yet, that some of that inventory is maybe slightly cheaper than if 80% of people had adopted it. So it feels like there's a potential opportunity there. And I think I read that YouTube video for action is being sort of subsumed into demand gen at some point. So that's probably going to lead to prices to increase in that campaign type, if you believe the sort of supply and demand theory there. So it feels like a big opportunity. And I think from what we've talked about, the biggest thing I take away from it is it really starts with sort of helping the client understand that sort of framework for how to view activity. There's not just a single line item. And I feel that has implications, not just inside that particular example, but in other areas of marketing. Like, you can't view this in the same way that you view this, because it's a different medium, it's a different audience, it's a different time to return. And that feels like it's always a challenging conversation. But if you can be good at that, then you're doing pretty well. It's half the battle.
I agree. I think that, I've been doing this for a really long time, primarily have an agency background. So I've worked with all types of clients across lots of different industries, everything from very small startups all the way to massive Fortune 50 brands. And I'd say, of course, when you're starting out, you're really in the weeds and you're learning everything that you can, right? And you're starting out with the basics and the fundamentals. But, I'd say even by year 5 of my career, I was going on business pitches and speaking with C-suite executives, of course, as part of a larger, more experienced team. And then shortly after that, I'm managing my own teams. And a lot of the role when you're in an agency environment is learning how to not only read between the lines when you're having conversations with clients. Oftentimes what they say they want is not actually what they want, right? Just due to lack of understanding of the channel or whatever it is you're talking about. And so that, I think, is something that's really key. That is a skill you sort of learn over time. And then the other thing is just being able to respectfully push back on clients because it's in their best interest, and being able to educate them and influence them, oftentimes through relatable language, analogies they can understand, data-driven insights. And I think that is sort of an art in and of itself that I learned from watching like really amazing experienced leaders And then also just from the experience myself over the years. And so, yeah, I agree. I think that's a huge part of success in a client partnership, and earning their trust, and then just being able to really educate them throughout discussions and throughout presentations and data analysis, to get them on board.
Yeah, that feels like the start of a very fun conversation around crafting a narrative and storytelling, which would be great to jump into. But this has been great. Thanks for agreeing to do it. It's been great to get your view on things and sort of tap into some of your experience. And yeah, I think there's loads more things we can chat about. So hopefully we can do another one of these soon.
We could have lots more podcasts, probably, on some of the things we touched on.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Marjorie.
All right. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.